Bleach 1000-Year Blood War episode 42 titled Son of Darkness is finally here, and it's time to break down and analyze how this episode compares to the manga. The title itself is a direct reference to the moment that Yhwach welcomes Ichigo into his throne room and claims him as his Son of Darkness. This is adapted faithfully from chapter 672. This episode primarily adapts content from chapters 664 to 666, as well as material from chapters 672 to 674, so you can see there's a lot of chopping and rearranging of manga content. All in all, there's about 5 chapters worth of material within episode 42. But don't be disappointed, because this episode is once again completely packed with anime exclusive editions. What immediately took me by surprise is that the episode opens with a brand new anime original flashback, which features Orihime and Tatsuki at an indoor botanical garden, a scene which ties directly back to the Gloriosa flower, which we have seen associated with Ichigo during the 1000-Year Blood War Core 1 opening, as well as the ending song. The first half of the episode is largely dedicated to the conclusion of Urahara's battle against Askin, whilst the second half weaves together Ichigo and Orihime's confrontation with Yhwach alongside the ongoing anime original fight between Uryu and Haschwalth. As we have come to expect from this final core, the anime continues to rearrange and pad out the source material in a major way, as it jumps between battles that are kept completely separate in the manga, and it expands several of them far beyond what we had seen within the source material. Urahara's Bankai receives an incredible extended introduction, Orihime's involvement in the fight against Yhwach is noticeably enhanced, and Haschwalth debuts a brand new transformation that doesn't exist anywhere else. So be sure to stick around until the very end of this video, as I'll be explaining the meaning behind the Gloriosa flower and its link to Ichigo from the opening flashback, and exactly what it symbolizes about Ichigo and his character. As always, I'm going to refrain from talking about scenes which are one-to-one adaptations from the manga, and I'll solely focus on what's being cut, changed, and added to the anime. So without further delay, here's my manga versus anime comparison for episode 42 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. The episode opens with the flashback of a school trip to an indoor botanical garden where Orihime is looking at a Gloriosa flower. We see this flower in 1000-Year Blood War opening 16 Scar and ending 31 Saihate. Now let me explain some context behind why this flower and Ichigo are linked. The Gloriosa flower is also called the Glory Lily, a flame lily, or even climbing lily. In Japanese, the way that it's written can mean glory and bravery. Its name is derived from the Latin word gloriosus, which means splendid. This name was inspired by its bright, fiery coloration and majestic wave-like petals. The symbolism invoked by the Gloriosa is not only greatly linked to Bleach's grand return with the 1000-Year Blood War arc, but it also complements Ichigo's character. Ichigo's name means to protect one thing, and he has lived up to his name by bravely fighting a number of glorious battles to protect those that are important to him. So Orihime and Tatsuki have some anime exclusive dialogue here. Tatsuki asks Orihime what she's doing, as Orihime says, "Yeah, I was just thinking that this flower kind of reminds me of Kurosaki." Orihime is looking at the flower, as Tatsuki says what it does. Ichigo's not as red like that flower, but isn't he more like that one? Tatsuki points at orange calendula flowers. Orihime says, I think you're right. Tatsuki goes on to say, well, it doesn't really matter which one he is. We can talk about Ichigo later. Anyway, let's get going. We need to finish seeing everything by 1/2 the hour. Orihime agrees, as Tatsuki complains about how double period classes are such a pain. Orihime turns back to look at the Gloriosa flower as she thinks to herself, Kurosaki's heart must surely be. The Gloriosa flower then burns up with fire, as we cut to present day Orihime running behind Ichigo as they charge towards Yhwach's throne room. She continues adding to her last remark, the same color as that flower, warm, kind, and shining its light brightly on everything around it in order to protect everyone. That's why I decided Kurosaki, and then the scene cuts off. But it's a really great anime exclusive edition that's subtle and on the nose. You can see the admiration that Orihime has for Ichigo, how she compares the Gloriosa flower to him, the flower that represents glory and bravery. and in this moment where Ichigo is charging against Yhwach, he is displaying these very traits of glory and bravery. Then we cut to content from chapter 664 as the entirety of the chapter is adapted as we see Urahara vs Askin continue. Now everything is faithfully adapted, but when Urahara's Bankai is revealed, the anime expands upon it with a longer introduction, as we see a first-person perspective from the view of Benihime as she crawls out from darkness behind Urahara, pulling back curtains and appearing on the battlefield. The anime staff have added a horror-like aesthetic to Urahara's Bankai activation as we hear the rattling of Benihime slowly crawling out. She appears as a giant female mannequin wearing a red robe. We continue as content from chapter 665 is adapted, but there are a few notable additions which the anime does to expand upon the confrontation. So the content from page 9 of this chapter, after Urahara reveals the ability of his Bankai and cuts Askin, we end up getting a brief anime exclusive scene of Urahara riding on the stitches of his Bankai in mid-air, which do a great deal to expand upon the nature and ability of his powers. Because in the manga, he's just literally gliding through the air with these stitches around him, but the anime does a great job of showing us that Urahara can in fact glide on these stitches through the air. Then from page 11 we see more anime expanded scenes of Urahara riding on his stitches after he restructures his arm to be stronger and he sends Askin flying into the ground. This is a great expansion of the manga which conveys how Urahara's Bankai helps him traverse the battlefield. It looks incredibly cool and it's really well animated. Material from page 10 is also expanded after Askin says, "You're a bad man, Kisuke Urahara." There's a brief anime exclusive clash as Urahara strikes down Askin, who defends the attack. Material from page 13 also gets expansion after Askin says, "You're only breathing in here because I'm moderating it." We get additions which pad out the Urahara vs Askin fight as we see Urahara restructure his foot as he evades multiple gift balls that are being sent his way. He grinds on the stitches to dodge the gift balls in the air and he cuts through multiple gift balls too. Askin charges up a large attack as Urahara rushes forward, with his stitches allowing him to glide past Askin's attacks, as he jumps off above the battlefield, swooping down, riding his stitches through more of Askin's attacks, charging at the Quincy, with Askin teleporting closer to him, striking Urahara down, making him hit the ground. Then the rest of chapter 665 is faithfully adapted until Grimmjow arrives, impaling Askin with his heart in his hand. Then the final moments of Askin's defeat are adapted from chapter 666, from the point where Askin collapses to the ground, to where we see Neliel reacting to a opening within the Gift Ball Deluxe as Urahara collapses to the ground as he apologizes to Ichigo and Rukia. We then cut to the mid-card of the episode. This week's mid-card is on Kanon Biraki Benihime Aratame, the Bankai of Kei Urahara Zanpakuto Benihime. It's a colossal Benihime that manifests the instant that it is activated. It possesses the ability to remake anything it touches. That power extends to anything existing within the Bankai's deployment range. Not only people and objects, but even special territories, domains that are created by an enemy can be remade. A target that is struck by the attack of Benihime is instantly dismantled and has its very nature or properties altered. The second half of the episode begins by adapting content from chapter 672, as pages 13 to 17 are faithfully adapted. So it's from the point where Ichigo and Orihime arrive at the door of the throne room, to where Yhwach welcomes Ichigo, referring to him as "my son of darkness." We then cut to material from chapter 673 as pages 5 to 11 are adapted, from the point where Yhwach says, "Aren't you going to draw your sword? That leaves you awfully vulnerable," is what I would like to say. All the way up until page 11 where Ichigo charges towards Yhwach firing the Getsuga Tensho. The only difference is that a panel from page 7 here is cut from the anime. It's a panel of Ichigo responding to Yhwach where he says, "Don't give me that crap, I know you see how I'll attack you." Yhwach's response to that is also cut where he says, "I won't use my power." This is because the anime is changing how details of the Almighty are relayed to us, and we're about to see how with the next anime exclusive scene, which features Uryu vs Haschwalth. Now this is just over 1 minute long as we return to their fight as we get even more anime original content, with Uryu using his Volstandig with many arrows targeting Haschwalth. He points his arm out as the arrows lengthen from the tip with beams of reishi aimed at Haschwalth. Haschwalth releases Black Reiatsu from his sword, swinging down against Uryu's arrows. Uryu flies over Haschwalth, making distance between them as Haschwalth follows him, while Uryu sets a trap for him, which Haschwalth effortlessly swats away by releasing more Black Reiatsu from his sword. Haschwalth is then seen evading Uryu's attacks, but one strikes him as he falls down while Uryu says some new dialogue. He states simply being able to see the future doesn't mean he can win. I simply have to attack in a way he can't defend even if he knows it's coming. He continues firing arrows down at Haschwalth while also summoning several arrows that he brings together into a ball of powerful reishi that transforms into a giant holy arrow that is aimed at Haschwalth, who is buried under rubble. Uryu states, "I'm going to send you and that almighty power to the grave." Following the attack, Haschwalth emerges from the dust with several arrows penetrating his body, but they slowly pull out as Black Reiatsu oozes from his body as he states, "I will rectify your ignorance, Uryu Ishida. Simply grasping everything about a battlefield is a far cry from seeing how a battle unfolds. You sent Ichigo Kurosaki to fight the most important battle. You probably calculated on Ichigo defeating his majesty when he is without the Almighty. That was a reasonable strategy, but a mistaken one." Haschwalth then begins to reveal an all-new anime-exclusive transformation as Black Reiatsu covers his eyes completely and it continuously pours down, revealing 3 blue irises in each of his eyes. We then return to material from chapter 673 of the manga as the rest of the chapter is adapted. Material from page 13 of the chapter, when Yhwach pushes back against Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho, features anime-exclusive dialogue. Ichigo says, "The power of the Soul King." This is in reference to the Black Reiatsu that Yhwach uses, which looks similar to what Haschwalth is using against Uryu. We then have material that expands upon page 14 of the chapter, as we get a brief anime original scene of Orihime summoning a shield in front of Ichigo, which he uses to charge ahead towards Yhwach until it breaks. Manga content is mixed with brief original scenes of Orihime's shields appearing to protect Ichigo while he is charging towards Yhwach. They are already expanding upon Orihime's role in this battle so early on, showing shots of her actively helping Ichigo. So yeah, the rest of the chapter is adapted to the point where Yhwach gets up and says, "Now, shall we fight Ichigo?" We then return to Uryu vs Haschwalth as we get around 40 seconds of anime original content, with Haschwalth being seen with 3 pupils in each eye with Black Reiatsu leaking from both eyes. As he states, it was a smart choice to focus on the Almighty, however, it was overly arrogant of you to try to measure his majesty. Uryu fires that massive holy arrow that he charged earlier at Haschwalth, who swipes the air in front of the arrow with his black reishi infused blade as Uryu's attack is effortlessly negated. We see black reishi cover the arrow and shatter it completely. Haschwalth then says, "The Almighty." Uryu looks shocked as the black reishi appears over Haschwalth's shoulders and covers him down his arms, hands and legs, with trails of black reishi flowing from his body and completely covering his blade. He says, "What was it that you thought you knew about me, Uryu Ishida?" 2 eyes of the Almighty appear over the black reishi covering Haschwalth's shoulders. The irises are blue instead of red that we have seen on Yhwach's version of the Almighty. This seems to be Haschwalth's new anime exclusive The Almighty transformation. We see within each of the 2 Almighty eyes that appear on Haschwalth's shoulders as they show Uryu as he appears in front of Haschwalth right now, but lifts his blade, stating, "Despair begins now." We then cut to material from chapter 674 as pages 3 to 6 are adapted. So it's from the point where Ichigo gets up to where Yhwach says, "Expend all of your power and die, Ichigo." This week's episode of Bleach continued to shower us with new material, expanding upon so many moments that felt rushed within the manga. The biggest highlight for me was the conclusion of Urahara's battle against Askin, as his Bankai Kanonberaki Benihime Aratame was given an incredible extended introduction, complete with a genuinely eerie horror aesthetic, before we saw Urahara riding on the stitches of his Bankai to glide across the battlefield and weave through Askin's gift balls. It looked stunning, and it did so much to convey just how versatile Urahara's Bankai really is. The character work in the second half of the episode was equally impressive, as Yhwach welcomes Ichigo as his son of darkness, only for Ichigo to firmly reject him, whilst Orihime's expanded involvement continues to build upon her character arc of finally fighting alongside Ichigo rather than watching from the sidelines. And thankfully nothing major was cut this week, aside from a couple of small lines during Ichigo's exchange with Yhwach, which instead were expanded upon via Uryu versus Haschwalth, who gets to explain the mechanics of the Almighty somewhat. But this dialogue that was cut from Ichigo is inconsequential, as a lot of this is translated over to Uryu versus Haschwalth's anime exclusive fight. Speaking of that, the highlight of this episode has to be Haschwalth debuting his completely anime original version of the Almighty against Uryu. Even the details, like those blue Almighty eyes appearing over his shoulder, are incredible. It's a transformation that exists nowhere in the manga, and it once again proves how determined this core is to give Haschwalth the presence that he deserves as an endgame threat. Next week's episode is titled Blood for My Bone, and with this one ending on Yhwach telling Ichigo to expend all of his power and die, I fully expect Ichigo and Yhwach's battle to escalate dramatically, and I also imagine the anime original clash between Uryu and Haschwalth will continue now that Haschwalth has unveiled his new form. And given how much this core loves to interweave its battles, I wouldn't be surprised to see more of the Gerard fight, which is going to be reworked into the mix as well, hopefully. So all of you fans of the Vizards, episode 43 will feature the anime exclusive Vizard content which you've been waiting for. Now, we reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What were your thoughts on this week's episode? Did you enjoy the extended introduction to Urahara's Bankai? What did you make of Haschwalth's brand new anime exclusive Almighty transformation? Are you enjoying the expanded role that Orihime is being given in the fight against Yhwach? And how are you feeling about the pacing of this final core so far? If you've been enjoying these breakdowns and want to keep up with everything to do with core 4 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime, then please do subscribe to the channel for regular Bleach content. Lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you next week for my breakdown and analysis of episode 43 of the all-new Bleach anime.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.